Hello and welcome to Dateline New Haven. I'm Paul Bass, inviting you to look behind the headlines on the stories that make our community tick. Leslie Blatteau sure makes New Haven and Connecticut tick. She's the president of the New Haven Federation of Teachers, which is kind of like in a golden age. She just began her second term. And this past week, when our governor gave the State of the State address, Leslie Blatteau gave the State of the People address. She was speaking on behalf of a statewide coalition called Connecticut for All, making a pitch for not just looking at fiscal guardrails, but fiscal health for our families. Leslie Blatteau, thanks for coming back to Dateline New Haven. It's always great to have you.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
So how did it come about that you were the one? It was sort of like you were Katie Britt or somebody. You were giving the big speech in when she gave the response to the State of the Union with the president. You were giving the response to the State of the State of Lamont. How did that come about?
Well, I work closely with the Connecticut for All Coalition. And NHFT and AFT Connecticut are both participating members in the coalition.
Okay, you talked about the teachers' unions, NHFT and American Federation of Teachers. And what is the Connecticut for All Coalition?
So we're a coalition of several labor groups, labor unions, community groups, faith-based groups who are really focused on economic justice and tax justice in the state of Connecticut. We have an upside-down tax structure in this state, where when we're talking percentage of income, the ultra wealthy are paying a very small percentage of their overall income in state and local taxes, and working class and middle class people are paying much higher percentage of our income.
Right. A teacher or bus driver pays almost 3 times a higher percentage of their income in taxes than does a hedge fund owner.
Exactly, and we want to flip that upside down. It's possible. We have a long-term vision, and it's something that I believe in personally. It's something that NHFT and AFT Connecticut are active in, and I'm the steering committee chair of the Connecticut for All Coalition. And the director, Norma Martinez-Hosang, said, is this something that you'll do?
Was it fun?
Absolutely. And you know me. I love to deliver a speech. That doesn't stress me out.
You speak from the heart.
Brings me joy. And it was a great opportunity to make sure our agenda is front and center this legislative session.
Let's talk about that agenda. You said, quote, good fiscal health for the state. And we do have good fiscal health in the state short term. Does not equate to good fiscal health for our families. Our communities are crying out for help. You call for progressive tax reform and investing in people make Connecticut strong. I think you were just bringing it up now in terms of having fairer taxes. And I guess would the proposal be having higher marginal income tax rates that once you've made $500,000 or $1 million, then that rest of that money, you bring it up to 7.5% rather than 6.9%. That's the one I was here.
Yeah, and the reality is
that's what Massachusetts has, what New York has.
Our equity agenda does cost money. We're not going to pretend that it doesn't. And we know that by adjusting the fiscal roadblocks, we can create some opportunity for more spending for the equity agenda. And
well, that's a different issue, the fiscal roadblocks. So that is a big issue right now.
They go together, though.
Okay.
Yeah.
In 2017, there was a bipartisan agreement because we'd had a lot of fiscal stress in our state, a lot of big budget deficits, all that, because of the volatility of our income. So much of it comes to the financial industry that a few very wealthy people in Fairfield County can make our coffers go up and down. So they say those people file quarterly. There's a limit to how much of those quarterly income taxes we could take and spend. We got to use the rest into either paying down debt on our pensions or putting it in the rainy day fund.
Right.
We've brought in a lot more money than was expected from that. We have filled up our rainy day fund, which is a good thing.
Absolutely.
We've paid down pension debt, but we still have among the highest pension debt in the country. And our fiscal rating has gone up, which means we'll pay less on debt. So people have said that's a success. That's going to give us more money long-term to pay for community colleges and early childhood education and teacher salaries and paras and all that. But that in the short term, there are people saying that was an arbitrary formula, and you don't have to put all that in there. You've already maxed out the fund. You can put some of that back in general fund. Is that what you're referring to?
Absolutely, yeah. We can adjust the spending cap so we can spend more. We can adjust the volatility cap so we can collect more. And I recognize people worry about long-term sustainability of the state, of economic health in the state. And that's why we are partnering demands to adjust the fiscal guardrails, the fiscal roadblocks, with progressive taxation. Because if we spend down some of that rainy day fund, we can generate more revenue through taxing the ultra wealthy.
I don't think anyone's talking about spending down the rainy day fund because we have a legal cap on that. I think they're talking about how much will go toward pension debt, which is high.
Yes. But we have unprecedented payments towards pension debt in the last couple of years that are optional. That these are not mandatory payments that we've been making. Yeah. So I think we should pat ourselves on the back and now recognize that there is a reality for working people in this state, and we have to prioritize their needs. We are not operating, Senator Winfield said it best at the Equity Agenda launch on Tuesday, we are not listening to the people and their needs. We have people working 2, 3 full-time jobs. We have people, paraprofessionals, home healthcare aides, who are working homeless people. This is the reality of working people. So we can't pretend like fiscal health is outstanding. Well, it might be for bond ratings, great. But when it comes to average people who are truly struggling, when it comes to the infrastructure and the state of our schools, we are in crisis. When it comes to still the fact that we have so many vacancies for special education, we are in crisis. Let's admit that there is work to do, and that work requires spending. It does.
Let's talk about that work. We're talking to Leslie Blatteau, President of the New Haven Federated Teachers, Steering Committee Chair of Connecticut for All Coalition, the person who delivered the statewide response to State of People address last week about what we should be doing this upcoming term. So you said we need to be spending more money on specific needs because of these challenges working people face. So you've identified healthcare, childcare, education, living wage jobs, and safe housing investments. Can you tell me specifically about that? You said there was an unveiling last week, was it, of the agenda?
This Tuesday. This
Okay.
Tuesday was the Equity Agenda launch up in Hartford.
And what are some of the specific proposals you want to have that money spent on?
So we'll start with education. The first is we want to improve the educational cost share formula. So educational cost share formula just recently was agreed to be fully funded, and which is great news. However, the formula itself needs improvement. So there's what's called a foundational aid amount, which is how much we get per student. And again, the educational cost share formula is what the state kicks in for municipalities like New Haven who don't have the property tax base to fully fund our
we still
schools.
have about half our budget or more for the schools comes from the state, correct?
Yes, through the educational cost share formula. But the foundational aid amount per student, I think it's about $11,000 a year, has not gone up in probably about a decade, has not gone up for inflation to adjust for inflation. So we know typically districts are spending $20,000 at least on a student. That formula puts per pupil spending at $11,000. That's got to go up. In addition, we get weighted funds from the state based off of students who come from low-income homes and English language learners. We also want to get increased weighted funding for our students with special education needs. So that's another recommendation for the ECS formula.
You said they already were weighted, but you want to change the weight?
Yeah. We want to add special education students as another weight to that educational cost share formula. We know it costs more money to teach students who have more needs, who have more challenges. So let's be real about that. Let's recognize that we can't keep shifting the burden onto the municipalities.
And what's the shortage been? You said there's been a shortage of hiring special ed teachers. Is the money would be just to raise salaries to attract more, or what would you like to do?
I mean, and this is where the devil's in the details up in Hartford. But we want ultimately we need to have real conversations about putting some caseload caps, some kind of boundaries around how large the caseloads of our special education teachers are and related service providers. So school psychologists, social workers, speech language pathologists. The caseloads that our certified professionals are dealing with just keep going up. As the student population in Connecticut does trend down, the special ed population is trending up. So we have more and more students with more complex needs. And if we don't do something to provide some relief to the professionals who are providing the supports, we're going to keep losing folks.
And then we talked about child care. What are some of the, I know that early child education, we're having a shortage of people, correct? There's been a funding shortage. Some centers have been closing or at risk of closing. Is it a block grant? You're looking for more aid? I know there's a whole coalition fighting for that.
We want to make sure that our people who are providing care to our youngest learners, to early childhood centers, are earning at least a living wage, if not more. And we want to make sure that families are getting the child tax credit as well. Making sure that there's
so expanding the earned income tax increase and
absolutely
raising
wages for our child care professionals.
What is the living wage now in Connecticut? Because are we at $16 an hour?
I mean, that's
for the
minimum wage.
Is 16.
And I think it's got to be up to $20, $25 an hour. Don't quote me, but it's as costs are going up, as inflation continues to impact working families. I recognize that it's got to be getting up there.
And then you talked about living wage jobs in general. What can the legislature do to encourage more living wage jobs?
I think, through one, we know our paraprofessionals who are working in low-wage jobs, our cafeteria workers who are working in low-wage jobs, they're funded, again, through school budget, through local school budgets. And we know that districts like New Haven, Hartford, Bridgeport absolutely need more support from the state.
Well, again, that would be general through ECS, or educational court sharing, not just through weighting, but you want to see overall payment more by upping the
absolutely.
The baselines.
We have to be willing to acknowledge that things cost more.
And the school board then will need to allocate that money.
Yeah, and that comes through contracts. But I think there's going to be more opportunity for better work to be done at the negotiating table when the pressure is off the municipalities and more support is coming from what we know is one of the wealthiest states in the country that is doing well financially.
And then, so Leslie, you talked about safe housing investments. There's been a lot of talk about how do we promote more affordable housing. There's the Build group that says even if it's not subsidized housing, having more housing on the market will ease the pressure of demand, so there'll be more supply, and then other housing will cost less. Other people say that's theory, not practice. You have to have more specifically subsidized housing paid for by the state or the city. What are you saying with safe housing investments? What does that mean?
Our focus area when it comes to Connecticut for All and our housing agenda is just cause eviction. And, we know that protection is in place for folks 62 and up, for disabled folks who are living in apartments with 5 or more units. We want to see those protections extended to anyone living in an apartment building with 5 or more units. Too often we're hearing of folks being punished by landlords for organizing tenant unions. We're hearing of folks, having the rug pulled out from under them when their rent doubles and they're left with nowhere to go. So, these protections absolutely would help improve the living conditions of students that we teach here in New Haven, of students in New Britain. I'm hearing, homelessness in New Britain, in New Haven, and other folks around the state is really on the rise, and this is kids.
That's interesting. Why New Britain? Why is that the one that pops up?
I'm talking with folks there.
It's an interesting city.
Yeah.
It doesn't get much attention.
It doesn't.
But it has a pro-union Republican mayor. And it has this really fast-growing Latino population. I was there last time. All the commerce I saw in a pretty beat near the center of town district, it was all immigrant-run Latino.
Yes,
or Puerto Rican.
Yeah. No, it's an interesting city. And, as I tune into some of the AFT members there who, it's somewhat anecdotal reporting, I guess, but teachers' anecdotal reporting of what they're experiencing with their 26, 27 kids.
Deep about the kids who are homeless going to school. Is it mostly doubling up, or are they living in shelters, or what are we?
I think it's a combination, doubling up, living in shelters, and then it's another definition of
couch surf, right?
Yeah. Another definition of homelessness is when you've lived in 3 or 4 different places over the last year. And if you're constantly on that moving cycle,
how do you focus on school? I guess some kids are incredibly extraordinary, like they're.
It's a challenge, and I always question myself, because I care about a wide range of issues outside of education specifically. But I always say to myself, what we're advocating for, how does it connect back to the needs of the members that I represent? And I could say to my members, absolutely, that if we know that when our students have stable housing, our job is less hard. Our job is hard, no matter what. But if our students have stable housing, which is something that we can use our union muscle to advocate for, then our job is going to be less hard in the classroom, because it is easier to teach a young person who has stable housing versus trying to, encourage them to stay focused when we know they don't have enough rest, when they know they're dealing with the trauma of having just moved, when we know that stability matters when it comes to attendance, which we know is one of NHPS's goals, but when it also comes to feeling like they're getting the most out of their education. So these issues do connect back to the needs of our union members. We believe 100%.
And you talked about just cause eviction. Is there anything else on that homelessness and housing agenda? Any other specific proposals?
That's our explicit focus for this session.
For just cause.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And then, one quandary about raising taxes on the wealthy, which kind of seems like one of those obvious things in New York. And people say you'll lose all these millionaires, but the data doesn't show that necessarily.
Data doesn't show it.
But, New York and Massachusetts do have that higher interest rate to 7.5% if you're making over $1 million. One legislator I know who's a big advocate of this said that once a lobbyist for wealthy people was sitting there and with him in the LOB, let's say Ross building, saying, I don't care what rules you change. That's going to be fine. We know how to dodge all these taxes. I'm not going to be paying more. Go ahead, have a fun day. Is that true, or?
I would hope that it wouldn't be true. I'm not surprised that you say it, that wealthy people have the high-priced lawyers who know how to dip and dodge out of what they owe.
Yeah.
However,
Still
it
get
doesn't.
the net gain.
Shouldn't be the reason why we don't try to do it.
And you
Massachusetts
do
has
get the net
generated
gain.
incredible revenue for education and transportation with the millionaire tax. And Connecticut really should look to our neighbors to the north and start thinking long-term about
And
how
New
we
York.
can get there. Yes. Massachusetts passed it more recently, I think.
Okay.
And they're celebrating more revenue than they expected from it.
Leslie Blatteau is the president of the New Haven Federated Teachers and the steering committee chair of Connecticut for All Coalition. When you put those two together, it's interesting to me because you this is your second term. You just got reelected. Congratulations, second 3-year terms. And I feel like you had this laser focus on the nitty gritty of the union. In the classroom, you were a teacher. You brought a lot of people to be involved in the union, committees that get together, stuff they work at. You've also simultaneously had this focus of what it means to be in the labor movement, which has traditionally been how the New Haven Teachers Union has always operated. Is you don't usually used to see teachers union working alongside other unions in the city and statewide. Am I right about that? And is that a focus you've tried to change?
Yeah, that was one of our platform items when we ran in 2021. That we really wanted to be more explicit about solidarity with other unions. We know, we learned from history. I'm a history teacher that in solidarity there is strength. So we committed to that through building relationships with paras, through more recently building relationships with Local 217, the Unite Here cafeteria workers, and through participating in the coalitions like Connecticut for All. Our interests are the same. Again, my members benefit when every para position is filled in New Haven Public Schools. It is not. We are losing paras. It makes our job harder. And without paras, without cafeteria workers, we can't do our jobs. So to me, it makes sense that we would insert ourselves into the broader labor movement.
Am I right that wasn't happening? Did you used to see teachers union going to bat for paras, contracts, and cafeterias?
That wasn't typical, no.
I mean, forget even talking about like police union, and that's all complicated and all that, and AFSCME, but also county municipal workers, but also on the statewide level, it's interesting to me that you see obviously what happens in the state legislature going to directly affect your union, and that if you're also part of an agenda that involves the interests of other unions, that can also benefit you.
Absolutely. And we have to stay committed to it because, at the 11th hour, I think it's sadly standard. Legislators kind of writ large try to peel off subgroups and satisfy people at the end, figure out how we gonna finally, figure out this budget. And that's where our coalition is strong, that we know what is possible. We're not ready to negotiate in advance and give up things and sacrifice other members of the coalition. And we represent thousands and thousands of working people in the state. And what we're trying to do is really activate those people, get them in touch with their legislators, and make sure legislators know the real stories of what people are experiencing. We used to think that, 30% of our members live in New Haven. In New Haven Federation of Teachers. And, personally, I would like to see that number increase so that we have, more people living and working in this city, sending their kids to New Haven Public Schools. But in the short term, we're realizing that our members who are living in other towns throughout this state, we are absolutely going to be working with them to reach out to those more moderate Democrat representatives throughout the state and make sure that they're hearing that their constituents are negatively impacted by strict fiscal controls. Their constituents are negatively impacted by our aggressive tax system, and try to shift the conversation into other parts of the state.
And are you
as well.
doing that? Are your members lobbying their Guilford?
Yeah. I mean, we just kind of kicked off the session last week, but we are in the process of making more of those meetings happen. So in
other words, individual teachers who are involved in the union who don't live in the city, they are actively talking to the legislature. That's interesting, Leslie.
Yeah, no, we're excited about it.
So you saw what was seen as maybe not a strength of the union as an opportunity by having the 70%. That's just really creative thinking.
Exactly. Yeah.
So how many teachers are in your union?
Approximately 1,750, and that's teachers, school psychologists, counselors, social workers, library media specialists, certified professionals.
And I noticed that this time there wasn't much drama around your elections. The first time, not that it was mean or anything, but that it was a
contested race.
And it was kind of fun, right? You had democracy. You had big teams of people who cared about their union. And,
absolutely.
And now as you went the second time, you have all these people on committees. Look at all the people who are involved. What has changed over 3 years that there's this unity, that there wasn't a contested election, but there are people who are making time at night to go, or at the end of the day, to these like committee meetings and lobbying their legislators?
I think first and foremost, people feel supported. People feel like the union is visible, is present, is engaged, is responsive, and people see themselves in the work. More people see themselves in the work. So the fact that people feel heard, feel represented, I think was the first reason why it wasn't a largely contested race. And I think we admit that we still have a lot of work to do. The committee work still has improvements. We're not pretending like everything's perfect. And I think that willingness to be vulnerable and to admit when we still have work to do reminds people that it's incomplete. And the more people who get involved, the stronger that we're going to be. So it's this combination of being very committed to the work, creating opportunities for people to get involved, and admitting that there's still a lot of work to do. So
tell me about some of that work. What's some of you have a contract negotiations coming up in the fall. When does your contract expire?
Contract expires June 26. But we, per the Teacher Negotiation Act, we have to have it negotiated within a certain window. So we have to have a TA by, I think November of this
Temporary
year.
Agreement.
Exactly, in order to satisfy the requirements of that state law.
And meanwhile, people work under the old expired contract, and then it gets made up retroactively.
Well, no, it won't be expired. Our contract doesn't expire until June next year, June 2026. So it's all set up that we will have a new contract before the next one expires.
So you start November negotiating.
Exactly.
What are the big issues you're looking at? Is it salary? Is it conditions?
It will always be salary. We've got to do something about rising healthcare costs. We want to bring back the similar demands that we brought last session that we didn't get far enough on them, related to the needs of special ed teachers, related to the needs of our bilingual educators. We're reassured to hear the mayor speaking about the need for a librarian in every school. So when the mayor's talking points and the union's talking points overlap, that's a good sign. We need counselors in every school, library media specialists in every school. We need caseload caps for our special educators. We have to make sure that our salaries are competitive with surrounding towns.
Are they?
No, not currently. No. We made great progress last negotiations, but we've got to keep up with everyone else. Everyone else sees those big increases. Hartford just got some great raises, and we're going to keep at it. We also are going to be exploring how we can use our contract, use the health and safety provisions in our contract to ensure that our facilities are up to par.
Tell me about that, because we spent $1.5 billion plus rebuilding our schools, and in no time we were having failing HVAC. So what are we going to do?
It's a good question. We're going to work our butts off to get more revenue. More funds from the state. That's key. We have to be sure that we're having a conversation with Yale University about what Yale is willing to do, given the history of Yale and the city of New Haven. That truly, if you want to look at haves and have-nots, put Yale and New Haven public schools side by side. And then we have to really be diligent about how we're spending that money. We have to make sure that New Haven Public Schools is held accountable for how they're spending the millions of dollars that we do have on fixing our schools. And have they
been doing it well?
No.
And then you talked about you told Maya McFadden, our reporter wrote about your election, said that you want to recommit to restorative practices, which is the idea that you don't just kick people out of school when they do something wrong. You have a whole process where they apologize for it, realize what they did, make up for it. Has that gone by the wayside?
It kind of has, and I think, taking the Comer no-fault problem-solving approach, I'm not going to blame anybody for why it's not working, but I think the first reason is that there's a widespread misunderstanding of what restorative practice is, what restorative justice is. People tend to think that, because if you don't fully staff a restorative justice program, it becomes kind of like are you sorry? Okay, cool, let's keep going. But restorative practice is so much
deeper.
About accountability. Yeah. If someone has caused harm, they are supposed to be held accountable for the harm that they caused. So that takes time, energy, meeting, follow-up. And if there aren't human beings at the key points of finding out what harm was caused, how we can repair the harm, how we can follow up and make sure that the person who is causing the harm has their needs met, and then making sure that they're held accountable. Restorative practices doesn't mean no suspensions anytime. Restorative practices means that we're listening to the needs of everybody, and we're making sure that accountability is at the center.
And that you hope it's solved in a way so that the person who committed the act can also move forward and not do it again.
Absolutely, because they're still
So
our
when
students.
you talk about not blaming individuals, it made me think about the way when you make revolutionary or just structural change that require a new way of thinking in systems, a lot of energy goes through it at first. A lot of thought, a lot of people having time and making it work. And then I think sometimes over time it becomes part of the mainstream and people don't focus the same way. They don't make it fresh. They don't do it anew. New people come in. I'm thinking of community policing. I'm talking about how you teach reading. And like community policing always has to be reinvented based on what we know now about technology and the way people work. And I'm wondering if that's happening with restorative justice and whether it's happening with, we had all that attention about the teacher contract and how you have a process for evaluating when teachers aren't doing well before they can be removed. And the union participated in that, and that most people got more help to do better. And then when it was someone not doing well, they were removed, but there were fewer challenges because of the way the process worked. Is that still working, or does that need new energy? How does the evaluation system
Teacher
work?
evaluation system needs work. There's recommendations from the state of Connecticut that we should be shifting away from rating teachers and ultimately shifting back to really making teacher evaluation be about what are the teacher's needs, where does the teacher want to see themselves grow, and how can management administration make sure that those teachers' needs are met. It's, similar parallel process to how do we make sure students' needs are met. We have work to do when it comes to getting away from the obsession of rankings and ratings and really getting back to the needs of people so they can do the best job that they want to do. People don't show up to mess up. People show up, and if people are messing up, it's ultimately most likely because their needs aren't met.
Leslie Blatteau, I get so inspired with all the energy you bring to all the work you do and all the great ideas.
Feel
and all
lucky
the
to
things
do
you
it, Paul.
accomplished. So I feel lucky you were in here today to
Thanks.
fill us in. Keep it up. You got some work to do.
We sure do. We
There's
sure
an
do. It's going to be.
inauguration if Monday happens. There's going to be an inauguration, and what's that going to mean for you and your union?
It's a scary time. It really is. I think we had hopes that it wasn't going to go in this direction. We want to take Donald Trump seriously for what he says, and if the attacks on our immigrant communities, attacks on our trans teachers and students, cuts to Title I funds, these are real threats that are going to impact so many of us in New Haven.
How about the future of the education department?
It's disturbing to think. Still, so much of education is local and is state. So it's if McMahon is going to be the education department chair, I'm okay with there being no Linda McMahon, to be honest. But all jokes aside, we need the support from the state and federal government, which we're still not fully getting. We don't have fully funded Title I yet, and they're threatening to take things away. So this is about the students of New Haven, children and families in New Haven, and we're going to fight to make sure that needs are met.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Leslie Blatteau. Keep up the fight.
We will.
We're going to take a break, and if John Austin shows up, we're going to have the fire chief talking about the fires in L.A. and the impact here. But in the meantime, we're going to listen to the Afro-Semitic Experience performing I Wish I Knew How It'd Feel to Be Free from the group CD, A Plea for Peace. Catch you on the rebound.